Start with roll call for City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have 5 of 7 members present tonight, with Mayor Pro Tem Sarmiento and Councilmember Hudson absent.
Thank you. Do roll call real quick for planning and zoning. See, is everybody here this evening?
Yeah.
Everybody is present, so we will,
Yes, sir.
all 7 out of 7. We will move on to the pledge, please. Redecorate.
How about that?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a staff presentation on the public hearing item. Who would like to tell us all about it? Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the Commission and Council. This is a public hearing to amend the zoning ordinance to include several requirements and provisions pertaining to landscaping, tree preservation, condition of SUP approval for medical and other personal care service uses, North American Industry Classification System, commonly known as NAICS, code version update, and process of rezoning and possible correction of typos in the ordinance. Just a little background. Staff has been presenting amendments to. Staff is presenting amendment to the zoning ordinance in 3 specific areas. Number 1 is landscaping and tree preservation. There's been a lot of interest in the subject, and the draft is included in the packet. We have an amendment to the hours of operation related conditions for SUP approval of medical uses and personal care services. This stems from a recent SUP application wherein an emergency room had requested for an SUP, and it was brought to our attention that several medical uses have state requirement of 24 hours operation. So the condition is proposed to be amended to reflect that. And then finally, the current zoning ordinance adopted the 2007 NAICS code version. Staff is proposing to update it to the 2022 version of the NAICS code. And when we advertised, we included 2 items that we are not pursuing. One would be the process of rezoning. It's already included, and it covers everything that the Texas Local Government Code provides for. So staff is not recommending any amendment for that section. And then staff could not find any typos in the ordinance, but we'll keep reviewing to make sure if there's any, we amend it on time. So for the public hearing purpose, and just to be clear, there are only 3 topics. One is landscaping and tree preservation related section. One is the hours of operation related section for SUP approval for medical and personal care service uses, and then updating 2007 version of NAICS code to 2022. If y'all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from anybody?
I have one. I just want to clarify, when you say personal use, does that also mean like the massages and all that? So all that's lumped into that one NAS code?
That is correct. So that's the category under which you have massage uses and some other types of uses similar to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, we will call the public hearing to order then. To hear input from the public regarding an ordinance of the City of Manville, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Manville, Texas by amending Chapter 77 zoning to amend and include several requirements and provisions pertaining to landscaping and tree preservation, conditions of approval of SUP for medical and other personal care services related issues, possible adoption of revised North American Industry Classification System code for the process of rezoning and possible correction of existing typographic errors, providing a penalty in an amount not to exceed $2,000 per day for each day of violation of any provision hereof, and providing for severability. Okay. Any public comments? Second call for public comments. And final call for public comments. So no public comments, so we'll close that public hearing at 6:06. Okay. And then it appears that that's all we have for this portion of the meeting, so we will adjourn. Have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, and all in favor? And motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned from the joint meeting, and we will proceed into the regular PD&Z meeting here momentarily. So all 7 members. And we just completed the pledge a few minutes ago, so we will go ahead and skip to public comment cards. Do we have any of those? No? Excellent. Then we will open with the consent agenda, which contains 2 items this evening. Approve Meridiana Unit 16 Commercial Reserve Preliminary Plat and approving the meeting minutes date. Anybody have any objections or questions to those?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? And motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Okay, on to the regular agenda. First item, consideration of possible action to forward a recommendation of approval to City Council, an appeal to the City of Manville City Engineer's decision on a design modification request to allow a crushed asphalt driveway for a new home construction. Okay, who would like to give us a rundown on that one?
Good evening, Commission.
Evening.
I'm going to go ahead and present. So as you mentioned, the request is an appeal to the City of Manville's city engineering decision on a design modification request to allow for a gravel crushed asphalt driveway for a new home construction at 7619 Scott Avenue. So the applicant, Mr. Oscar Carranza, has proposed the following in lieu of a complete concrete or hot mix asphalt driveway. So the driveway beginning at the connection to the street up to the property line will be constructed of concrete, and from the property line within the owner's private property will be constructed of gravel / crushed asphalt material. And so on April 15th, 2025, a design modification request was denied by the city engineer on the basis that we do have driveway criteria laid out in Chapter 6 of the city's engineering design criteria manual. In Section A, Item 7, we do have laid out on asphalt streets, residential driveways shall be constructed either of concrete or asphalt and installed according to the City of Manville's design standards. The applicant has indicated that the gravel crushed asphalt driveway will be temporary and that there are plans to completely construct it with concrete within a year. A couple of items that have been attached are a vicinity map of the proposed, or of the property's location, the design criteria, the design modification variance form that was denied, the approved driveway plans, the proposed driveway variance plan, and then also some proposed asphalt examples that are intended to be used for the project. And then I do believe that we do have the applicant here who could also kind of speak on the project a little bit himself. But as far as a recommendation, we do not believe that there would be one applicable as it is an appeal to a denied request. So that is all that I have for my presentation for now.
Okay. Do we have anything from the city engineer for what their reasoning was aside from it didn't comply with the written guidelines? Was there any concerns or?
So I can answer a little bit on that. So background-wise, the requirement for driveways was always concrete in a previous version of our design criteria manual, and then it was further amended to allow for asphalt driveway on driveways that connect to asphalt roads. Now, the goal for that is to make sure we have hard surface driveways within residential development. We do have certain individual properties and development where older development that had gravel in place and they are legally non-conforming, which means it doesn't conform to our current standards. And the goal for the amendments to the design criteria manual from bringing it down from concrete to asphalt was to allow for more of hard surface rather than crushed gravel, because even though it's on the private property, there's impact in terms of dust and gravel coming onto the public street and all of that. So that was the reasoning for adopting changes to the standard so that it's easier for residents to meet that hard surface requirement. And the goal for the whole ordinance is to go down on the number of gravel or crushed concrete driveways that are existing currently as a nonconformity. Now, the applicant has discussed his situation with staff extensively. So his house is completed with few inspections left to finish get the certificate of occupancy, and is going through some sort of financial constraint because of which he's seeking approval of the crushed asphalt driveway so that within a 1-year time frame, he can build concrete, and that's his intent. However, from staff's perspective, our goal is to minimize or reduce the number of gravel. But he has the provision of the appeal process whereby y'all can review the situation and forward a recommendation to the city council.
Okay, and there's no mechanism available to make that concrete requirement, have an enforcement date essentially to be able to ride that window?
So one of the challenges we have is like once the certificate of occupancy is issued, then it's difficult for us to, and there's no telling what happens in the future.
Right.
Both from the app, and if the house gets sold, it's a different owner, and it's difficult for the city to enforce. So we don't have any mechanism by which we could consider that request and kind of follow through. And if we apply that to every other situation that comes in, it becomes a little cumbersome.
Yeah, and then I guess my last question is beyond not conforming with the guidelines, there were no specific concerns about this situation that,
Nothing specific about this situation, but generally
it
the
doesn't
dust
conform.
and the gravel getting onto the right of way and
Okay.
all of those things.
Okay.
And the applicant is here, and he had definitely expressed his interest in addressing the commission to briefly explain his situation. I don't know if that's the case still.
Yeah. Just to give me one more second, just to answer any questions from staff, and then we'll get you to tell
Well,
us.
my
about
thing is, on this road specifically, there might be 3, maybe 4 that have concrete all the way out. They're short drives. So if you're worried about the dust, that's the least of the concerns on that road. So
Yeah, this is one of those 4 houses that, they've all been built really recently. I guess my
pretty
question,
recent, yes.
when did this change, right? Like, when did it go from not being even allowed, like crushed concrete or whatever used to be very common over there? When did that change where it had to either be asphalt or concrete?
I'm not 100% sure history-wise, but ever since I've started, which would be 2022,
Okay.
there was the concrete requirement, and then I believe it was 2023 or 2024 when
Asphalt.
asphalt was
It's kind of a
allowed.
compromise between the all
Right,
concrete.
right.
And then whenever they come to the city to initially get the building permits and all of that from the very beginning, this is communicated to them that this is a requirement?
That is correct.
Okay.
So were the initial plans that came in where they showed the concrete driveway?
For asphalt?
I believe so. Otherwise, the permit wouldn't have been issued.
Oh, okay. So it was changed.
The plan that's in the packet that shows concrete driveway
Okay.
everywhere, and it appears to be modified.
But he was aware that that was a requirement.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
I'd like to hear from him.
Okay. Yes, sir. If I can get you to just come up and state your name for the record and your address, and then we can hear what you have to say.
My name is Oscar Carranza, Oscar, CARRANCA. And then my address is 7619 Scott Avenue, Manville, Texas, 77578. I'm here to ask for pretty much, like Jose said, a temporary deviance. I was not aware of the requirements asking for asphalt or concrete, first of all. When I submitted the plans, I did plan to have concrete all the way to the driveway. It's about 9,000 square feet driveway, so it's about $60,000 to $65,000 financially. I built this house, custom home, my wife and I, my 2 sons, a 3-month-old baby, and a 2-year-old. I built this house custom ourselves, hard-working money. We're almost there, right? We're only missing the last permits, which is electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. It's pretty much complete, it's ready to move in. Kyle is one of my neighbors. I'll follow all the inspections, I'll follow all the guidelines. This, design deviation application was submitted in January. I've been going back and forth with the city, I've been complying with them. They've asked if I can get a professional engineer to go out there and actually, assess the situation. A professional engineer in the state of Texas went out there and actually filled out the form that was requested by the city, the engineer of the city. They filled out the form saying there's no issues with the foundations, there's no issues with the drainage, and they don't see any issues if we just go with crushed asphalt or concrete. It's okay. Right now, the way the house is, the driveway is washout, which probably 65% of the city of Manville is out of washout, right? I hear you about the dust situation and all that, I understand. But why is it only applicable to me? Why is the concern only with my driveway providing dust and not the other driveways that are currently out of washout, right? But regardless about that situation, I'm just worried about me and my family and how I can move into my home, which is literally complete. The only thing that is stopping me is the driveway. I've they've asked about information about the crushed asphalt. I went into the city of the website on Texas Transportation. I provided that information. There's a couple of neighbors around my area that actually have crushed asphalt installed as their driveways, right? So me logically thinking, well, if my neighbors are allowed to have that, then maybe I'm allowed to have that. So that was my first proposal. Now, literally what I'm proposing is whatever I can do to get in there within the next month, within the next 2 months. I propose adding concrete from the street all the way to the property line with crushed asphalt inside my property, which is about 25 feet, 30 feet away from the road, which I don't think at that point dust will be a concern. I've also expressed a concern about, I don't want to do hot mix asphalt, right? The reason behind that is because, for example, I just parked in that driveway outside of the city hall. You can see cracks in that hot mix asphalt. So if I want to make an investment in my house and my driveway, I'd rather do it the right way, which is concrete. I agree. I'm not opposed of not pouring concrete. I'm just saying I can't afford pouring a $60,000 driveway right now, right? I'm willing to do the first 20 feet, 30 feet on both sides as long as I'm able to move in with my family in this home, right? You can ask Kyle, I follow every regulation, every inspection that is being applied to me by the city, right? Especially with the design criteria. I could have done it a different way, but no, I submitted this application in January, and now we're in May, where I'm trying to find a solution of how can I move into my home. That's all I'm trying to do, right? I'm not saying I'm not willing to pour concrete, and I haven't even proposed I'll get a notarized letter saying, hey, I will pour concrete within the next year. If not, I don't know, you can take my house away from me or something, right? I'm just literally asking, I want to move in. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. If you'll stay there for just one moment, I'll see if anybody has any questions for you real quick.
Sir, you're saying that they did not inform you that you had to do a concrete driveway?
No, so they didn't, they probably didn't because initially the plans had concrete driveway
So you were aware?
of,
The plans or the,
right, my plans always said concrete,
It
right? So
sounds like
I
it never
think
came up.
maybe if I had put another suggestion instead of concrete, maybe the city would have asked me, hey, it's denied, or you should go this, or do that.
So I think the plans he submitted called for concrete on there, so it was never
Question.
brought up, and discussed specifically. It's in the ordinance, but it wasn't discussed, it sounds like. Okay, what other questions?
I guess my question is, if the city said, hey, if he came to you with this in January and your response was, well, go get an engineer report, right? I mean, if this was going to be something that was going to be denied, then why do we tell him to go get an engineer report? That doesn't make sense.
So the design modification request is required to be submitted by an engineer, showing and using best practices and engineering principles how this, whatever the modification is being required, meets the intent of the regulation, and whatever is being proposed is an alternative that works towards achieving the intent of the ordinance. So it's a requirement of the form. So if the design modification form is not signed and submitted by an engineer, it's not valid, because that's how the design criteria manual is set up.
But when you told him to go see the engineer, did you tell him like, hey, this is against the ordinance? I mean, you know, I get where he's coming from. If he's saying, well, the city said, hey, go get this engineer. He hired this engineer. He went to all this trouble thinking that it was going to help him bring his case. And then, but it really wasn't. It was just a checkbox that it was never really going to be an option. Is that?
Well, that's the process. You submit a design modification process through your engineer, and it's reviewed, and it's either approved or denied. And if it is denied, you have the opportunity to appeal it, which is the process that we're going through right now. And that applies to every single application that we get.
Okay.
So I have a question, I guess, for Robbie. Bobby, that is, like he was saying, a notarized note, is there a way of putting like a second lien on the home and then it would be resolved once the concrete is poured?
No, we don't put liens on the property, but we do, in other situations that are similar, do variance agreements where we would have an enforceable contract at least that would not only memorialize the details, but also give us a legal leg to stand on.
Okay.
Is that something that would apply to this situation?
I don't know we've ever done that in this situation, but it could, and if that's the, the recommendation of PD&Z, I'm sure we could come up with something.
Okay.
It would be similar to our other subdivision ordinance variances, which you're surely familiar with, so it would be the same kind of concept.
Okay.
Hey, another option, I guess, Joe, for you is there anything like a temporary CO that has a date specified on it?
We do not have a formal temporary certificate of occupancy process, and also it's not a, I don't know how to say it. It's not a very good mechanism,
Come out of
actually.
house.
Yeah, because
I mean,
it puts the city in a bad spot eventually if something unforeseen happens or situation. I'm not saying that this particular case would be where we would get into a problematic situation, but a lot of cities have seen problematic situations because of temporary CO, because it just gets messy and cumbersome.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The concrete that's on the example, you said that's 25 feet in on both sides?
What example?
The drive, you have two drive, so you got 25 feet going in from the street that's concrete, but it's not been poured yet, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you're gonna do that 25 feet off the roadway, and then, I don't see where the dust is gonna be a problem. It'll be all his house, it's the dust. Because that's, 25 feet is a long way from the road. If if we allow him to do the crushed concrete or the caliche or whatever.
Crushed
Yeah,
asphalt.
whatever it may be, but 25 feet is pretty good far away from the street.
Okay.
So, I guess,
Do we have any other questions then for the applicant or for staff?
Well, I guess my thing is with Bobby, how difficult would that be? Is that going to be for him to write something up to propose, or would that be us
Well-
putting, me saying, hey, you get to work, or?
Well, ours is a recommendation, so it would only happen if
We would treat it like a
council-
subdivision ordinance variance, I believe. I talked to Joe's. I mean, I hate to speak for Joe's, but I think memorializing something similar to our subdivision ordinance variance would be appropriate.
Yeah, and if legal thinks that way, we are fine with that as an option. However, just to make sure we understand the 25 feet that was mentioned correctly, what's the 25 feet again?
that's poured concrete, according to this map, is poured concrete. It's 25 feet for each side of the driveway, and then he starts the gravel.
Do you want to explain that?
But you're going to put in the crushed asphalt, correct?
whatever allows me to move in. Right, I can't pour concrete right now all the way 9,000 square feet. I'm willing to make it like appeasing. I'm willing to do concrete 25 feet from the road into my property on both sides, and then the rest crushed asphalt, yes.
Well, let me ask you this then. As far as if you did like the asphalt, would that interfere with your concrete? And then also, how much expense would that be to you?
So,
Extra expense?
Right, so I've got a quote for the crushed asphalt all around my driveway, it's $5,000.
Yeah, it's real cheap right now.
So it's cheaper, a lot cheaper than.
Because that's what I did with almost all my drive when I built on my extension in 2018.
So I just want to make sure, Oscar, you clarify. So you're saying that you're going to do concrete from the street to the property line and then 25 feet inside your property?
25 feet
From the street.
from the street.
So from the street to the
So I will.
Yeah.
property line.
Actually will be within
The
my
one that's,
property
the
line. Well,
one map that's got the red and blue on it.
Okay.
Page 17 of.
Yeah, I don't think that's completely accurate because the property,
Yeah, that's what I was looking
it doesn't include the right-of-way on the drawing, but
No.
yeah.
Well, 25 feet.
Sorry. Yeah, and I think some of the confusion might be, at least from the drawing, it shows property line inside, not accounting for the right-of-way.
Yeah, because the right-of-way is not on that
Yeah,
drawing, right?
and the street.
Yeah, so the street shown all the way for its entire right-of-way. So wherever the edge of the street is not really shown. So the concrete would be from where the street is to his property line. So the blue would actually be like below that 154.02 feet line.
It would still be 25 feet in?
Yeah, whatever the setback is there, so. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions then, do we have a motion, a recommendation for city council?
Okay,
How would we,
Yeah.
how would we word it, Bobby?
And also, whenever you go for inspections or you ask for this deviance online, whenever I go, I have to submit all this paperwork for the
P&Z, mhm.
and also like the city of engineers, so you will have records on this online, in the portal, so.
Yes, sir, yeah, and we actually have all that here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever Bobby wants to address it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. We're going to make our motion, and next thing up will be the city council. We'll have the final say, so
Next Monday, right?
If it's on-
usually.
It depends if it's on the agenda.
Bobby, would this be enforceable?
Well, a contract would be enforceable, and it might be tied to some, the remedy be a revocation of a certificate of occupancy, which we don't like to do, but we would need something in writing, because as Joe said, once the occupation, we don't have a temporary, so it would have to be, that would be the enforcement mechanism, really.
So you could put it in to where May 1st of 2026, if this is not paved, that the occupancy would be denied, that
It would be revoked, and if they were still, I believe, I don't know which code it is, but it's an offense to inhabit a structure that does not have a certificate of occupancy, and that would, it could involve a ticket in municipal court, some sort of remedy like that ultimately, but that would be tied to that certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think if you're so inclined, I think it would be, the recommendation would be to approve the applicant's appeal of the design modification request, provided there's a suitable agreement, we call it a development agreement, and I don't know if this would be considered a development, but just provided there's an agreement to have an enforcement mechanism for noncompliance.
Okay.
For 1 year.
Did you get all that?
I make the motion that Bobby just said.
Yeah, I second that.
You're killing me, Smalls.
And all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously, 7-0. Second was one of these two, I believe.
Second?
Second, down there? Okay.
I did.
As usual, everybody did.
Everybody did.
First was me. Okay, next agenda item, consideration of possible action to approve a 30-day extension for Meridiana General Development Plan Amendment 24.
Good evening, Commission. The applicant is proposing an amendment to the Meridiana General Development Plan. This is the 24th amendment to the Meridiana GDP. And the 23rd amendment to the Meridiana was approved in March 2024. The proposed amendment adds a 35-acre tract located north of Masters Road. About 29 acres of the newly added tract will be designated as garden homes, and the remaining acreage will be designated as parks and open space. Per the most recently approved PUD, if tracts are added and designated as garden home through a rezoning process, the PUD itself is not required to be updated and reapproved by the City Council. So the applicant submitted the rezoning application, which is currently under staff review. And since rezoning, the added portion to the PUD is required prior to approval of this proposed GDP amendment, the applicant has requested a 30-day extension, allowing the GDP amendment to be addressed at the May 27, 2025 meeting. The request has been made to allow additional time to align this submittal with the rezoning of the proposed track. So city staff recommends approval of the requested 30-day extension so that it can be acted upon before May 28, 2025.
Okay, so this is just an extension to the existing one.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve that one.
Okay, motion to approve, second. All in favor? And motion carries unanimously. If nobody has any objections, I would like to skip C for a second, and can we combine D, E, and F?
I think that would work. If it's-
Works for y'all? Okay. And then combine D, E, and F, consideration of possible action to forward a final report recommending approval to City Council for all three items from the public hearing earlier, which was
Trees, the medical.
landscape and tree preservation, medical SUPs, and ordinance for the NAICS code updated to 2022. Anybody have any questions about any of those?
I have one question. Are we adding pine trees?
Yes, so that was one of the recommendations from Parks Board, and staff would recommend that we add that to the list of species. So if you would like, I can quickly go over. So the landscaping portion of this zoning ordinance was presented to the Manual Parks Board on Thursday, and it was well received, and we have a positive recommendation from them with inclusion of with the recommendation of including pine trees as one of the preserved species, protected tree species. So going over the list of changes, we're amending the definition to include some of the technical information needed to understand the ordinance. There is a section for intent and applicability clearly stating that it would apply only within the City of Manuel city limits. Then there are sections that clearly establish situations and specific trees that would be exempt from the preservation requirements. Then we have a section that talks about protected trees, what would qualify as protected trees. And at this point, I would want to emphasize that this ordinance is not with an intent to preserve every single tree out there. The focus is on big mature trees of certain species and above a certain threshold of size. And then there are other situations also, like, for example, if there's a tree that is part of a development plan as a requirement, those are protected. If there are existing trees that serve as a buffer between residential and non-residential, those are protected, and things of that sort. Then the ordinance establishes a tree removal permit process and requirement for documents that need to be submitted. Then there is a section for specific standards towards replacing trees if they're removed with a valid permit or without a permit. And then specific section about tree preservation credits for properties that are proposed for development and trees are preserved, so that any preserved trees could count towards their development landscaping requirement. And then some changes are being made to the development landscaping requirements. The big one would be currently it's a requirement that trees be planted in the right of way. We are removing that requirement and prohibiting planting in the right of way. We are currently requiring 1 tree per 5 parking spaces for non-residential development. We are changing that from 1 per 5 spaces to per 10 spaces. We are adding tree planting requirements on the property frontage along the streets, since we are taking out the right-of-way planting requirement. And we are also adding requirements for a landscaping buffer between residential and non-residential uses. So that's the list of items on the tree preservation. On the SUP, you all are, SUP hours of operation is a situation that was recently presented. You all know what it is about. We are amending the text to allow for 24 hours operations or an alternate operating hours if it's a state requirement for both medical uses as well as personal care services. On the NAICS code, the NAICS classification, when the zoning ordinance was adopted, the 2007 version was adopted, and since then there's been several versions. The most current version is the 2022 version. We are recommending adoption of that version. We've included a data sheet and a report that shows some of the changes that has happened between the 2007 and 2022. There aren't many significant changes. There are some name changes, some changes to the code. Some land use classifications have been restructured, like certain specific uses from one category went to another category. We've double checked and verified that these changes does not trigger any change on how it is allowed within the land use allowance. So we've provided a red line version of all these 3 ordinances, and staff is recommending that the PD&Z Commission forward a positive recommendation of approval to City Council and provide a final report to the council in this regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Ready for a motion? Motion to approve? Second? All those in favor? And motion carries 7-0. Okay. I'm going to have to excuse myself, so Kyle, I leave it in your capable hands.
You want to go back to item C then? That good for y'all? Go back to item C then? He's leaving us.
Amen. Oklahoma.
Presentation of Valencia PUD annual update.
Thank you. Yeah, quickly. So the city has one of the zoning districts is the planned unit development district, the PUD, and the PUD is reviewed and approved by the city council, and there's like phasing that happens. It takes time for these PUDs to develop, and there's a PUD manual that governs the approval and continuation of a PUD approval process. And the PUD manual requires that a developer shall provide updates to an annual report to the city about like percentage completed, anticipated date for completion, and any other details pertaining to where they're at in the development process. So up until now, staff would always have like regular updates from the developer group, and it was always great. And one of the things that we thought is starting this year, if they could put together a brief report to be presented to PD&Z Commission as well as the City Council, it'll be great. That gives them an opportunity to directly communicate the updates to the council and commission, and it also gives us some documentation to track. So we have Bailey, who's going to present like an annual report for the Valencia part.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Bailey Quadra. I'm the Development Manager for Valencia. I work for Hillwood Communities. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years. Valencia was originally approved back in August 2021. As of today, we currently have 670 platted lots. 570 platted lots. At the next council meeting, we expect to add another 49 and get over that 600 mark. Valencia at build-out is about 948 homes. We'll have 20 acres of neighborhood, retail, and commercial space. We have 80 acres of lakes and 8 miles of trails around those lakes. We'll have a rec center and 2 parks, pickleball courts, community pool, community meeting center. Very excited about this project, and I would say in earnest, we got rolling with sales back in March of 2024, and really since that point, we've added 78 total residents to our community, and we have 123 sales to date. We've averaged a $500,000 average sale price in our community. At build-out, I think that the Valencia community provides the city over $575 billion worth of value for the city. And so, I guess simple math, we have 948 homes, and I expect at the end of this project for us to likely eclipse about $575,000 average sale price, and then I would estimate our commercial to be valued from a taxable value standpoint to be about between 20 and 40 million. So, we're providing lots of value to the city. I think our customers are going to, or our home buyers are going to continue to shop and allow the city to continue to grow. In my report, if you've opened it, I start by breaking down some of the general, stats on Valencia. I talk about how many homes are under construction. I'm happy to talk about that in person. But some of the cool things that I think that we've done is we really tried to embrace the city of Manville. We want our residents to have a sense of pride in their community, and we want them to be proud of where we live, and we hope that we're providing that community for them. So Manville, Texas is located on our entry monuments, it's located on our wayfinding signs, and we really lean into the city of Manville. Things have been going well. We have about $70 million worth of infrastructure invested to date. I would say that represents roughly 70% of the project from an infrastructure standpoint being complete. The projects that I would consider to be most important, if you've driven Valencia recently, are those western lanes of Pollard. We recently had a pre-con, and that project will be under construction. And what that will allow is traffic to move through Valencia from Highway 6 to 288. And so right now it's just 2 lanes. Whenever we open up to 4 lanes, I think it'll significantly improve mobility, safety in the area, and it'll be important for not just our residents, but the entire region. We're underway on our rec center, Orchard House. That will have the pool, the pickleball courts, a meeting area, space for our HOA. It'll have a picnic area, a food truck area, and so that'll be a place for our residents to come and gather, a playground. And then, from a what's to come standpoint, we're mostly focused on marketing to realtors and making sure that we fill up these homes. And so sales have been strong to date, and we expect them to continue to get stronger as we move along. Some of the big events that we've had so far, we've always done ribbon cutting ceremonies with the city. We've had grand opening events where we pull in the community out in ISD.
Bailey, can you please turn on the mic?
Yep.
Sorry. Yep. Thank you. And so, and I highlight some of these events in our article or in our progress report there, and I like to include the links so that you could access the articles written by Community Impact. And I think what Community Impact does a great job of is tying in, everything's tied in with the city of Manville. We're happy to be here. we're proud of the community that we're creating, and I think it's only going to continue to get better as we continue to landscape everything, and you start to see more growth. But that's generally my report. I am open to questions or comments, or if you'd like the report presented in a different way, or add something else, I'm happy to do that.
Just one question. When you say retail, is that inside the neighborhood?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So within our PUD, we have zoned about 10 acres on Del Bello Boulevard.
Okay.
We also have.
Is that there, right there at the corner of it?
The green and red?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
We also have some commercial acreage that's right on the corner of, or right on the intersection of Pollard and Del Bello. And then we have a daycare site across from the school, right here.
And so that makes up about what we estimate to be about 20 acres of future neighborhood retail commercial. Since we've put out some signs, and we have received some interest from dentist offices and things like that. And so I have not heard from a donut, not yet.
Or dentist. We don't need more dentists.
A car. What would the city like to see there?
Things we don't have.
Things you don't have, yeah.
Not dentist office,
Yeah.
donut shops, and
No, we really have enough.
And no more urgent cares, please.
No more urgent cares.
I'm just kidding. I know we don't get to make those decisions sometimes, but. So right there on Del Bello where you have the EO1, is that already zoned for commercial?
Yes.
It is?
Yep. I guess we are locked into specific uses in our PUD, and they're the general neighborhood retail commercial uses. But yes,
Okay.
zoned from a PUD standpoint, I think we would still have to submit a SUP permit, correct? Whenever we went to develop it?
Depending on the type
Yeah.
of use, yeah.
Just all residential right there. I just didn't realize that was.
And I think generally we would prefer to hold the commercial land until there are more rooftops. And we're still very early, with 78 residents right now. And, I think likely it'd be best to wait till we're further, till we're a more mature community.
You get more support for it too. You'll have a hard time getting support.
Yep. And we'll hear, we hear quite a bit from the residents. And so they'll let us know what they think is needed in the community. And, we're happy to listen.
Are there any plans to tie Charlotte Road into?
We have discussed with the city about tying in Charlotte to both Iowa Lane and into the dead end at Lakeland. And I think that's something that we're working on, and it's something that we'd like to complete. I think it'd be very important for just regional mobility. And so that's something that we're open to doing. And I know it's something that we're discussing with the city.
Okay.
What we don't own all the land up to the Lakeland, where the road stops. We own to about the C12 ditch, which is about our eastern boundary in Valencia. And then there is a landowner here that is between us and Iowa Lane or Iowa Road.
So on Del Bello, I'm just trying to get a frame of reference because that Manville Parkway doesn't go all the way through yet, right?
Future.
Up to Del Bello, like I see that Del Bello right there on the west side where Manville Parkway is.
That's right.
That's not all the way through yet, is it?
It goes to about where? I think it goes to about right here.
And that's Del Bello Lakes right there.
That's correct. This is the Del Bello Lake Century.
Now, is that
But you have
Manville
to-
Parkway or is that Pollard?
That's Manville Parkway. Pollard's in the middle of the neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pollard's over in Lakeland.
Yeah.
Pollard is open. Yep.
Well,
The
but
two
even
eastern lanes
even
are.
off of Highway 6, you turn onto Pollard to go into Blue Water Lakes.
Yeah.
So that's that light that goes into
y'all
Blue Water
share
Lakes right there.
that.
Oh, yeah.
But then it'll extend all the way to Del Bello. But it doesn't go yet to Del Bello, does it? Pollard?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yes. So today you could travel from Highway 6 to
Into the
to
backside.
288.
Okay, I need to go back there. I haven't.
Correct. Yep.
I mean, I go down the back way of Double. I guess I didn't realize it's there.
So we have a
Gotta keep
cool article, and we did a ribbon cutting with Dan Davis
Yeah.
and for that Del Bello Road opening. So that was a big deal for us.
Yeah.
We were excited about it. It has tremendously helped sales
I'm
traffic.
Sure, yeah. Anything you can do to keep from having, and Highway 6 is just all that
With that
development's
construction.
coming. People are gonna be looking for some back roads.
And then the 288 underpass, or the Del Bello underpass that TxDOT is working on, that'll be very big when residents don't have to U-turn at Highway 6. So
All 4 of those bridges.
That's Rodeo Palms on the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have anything else?
No, that's it. I'm sorry. It was visual. I was thinking it was further east than it was.
yes, I'm happy to be here, happy to answer questions. So we'll get on an annual cadence for this. So I think our original PUD was approved in August of 2021. And so we'll consider this an interim report. And then we'll come up here and present again in August, and that'll be our regular cadence. And then we do meet with city staff. We try and meet with them monthly, and so we've continued that for the last 3 years. And yep, so
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it. On to item G, presentation and discussion of comprehensive plan, update and major thoroughfare plan, update by Keending Keast Collaborative. If I said that right?
Yes, Kendi Keast.
Keast.
Good evening, Commission. Kendi Keast is our consulting team who's been working on our major thoroughfare plan and comprehensive plan. I'm sure you all remember a strategic plan was adopted. We've had workshop number 1 while I wasn't here. This is workshop number 2. Without further ado, please. And if we could have the presentation on the screen, that would be helpful.
Good evening, Commissioners. And I wasn't here at Workshop 1, so I'm giving Jennifer a break tonight. You heard from Jennifer last meeting, and we're going big picture. Not going to talk about driveways, or this is about the long-range outlook for the city. We may mention driveways along the way, but partly to give you an update on where we are in our process, but also very informal tonight, so please, any questions, comments along the way, but kind of give you what some of our thinking is as we work our way toward potential action items in the citywide comprehensive plan and also updating the thoroughfare plan as well. So on our agenda tonight, we're partly talking about future land use, but also thoroughfare plan. Kind of in the background of all this is thinking about infrastructure implications, water, wastewater drainage, and I should have mentioned, along with myself and Jennifer, is the advance. Do I have the advance here for the slides? I noticed that it keeps coming up over the slides. There it goes. Also with me, Jennifer Mack, who, as I mentioned, heard from last time, and James Andrews, Adrian Shimmick with AARK Engineers. And so they are looking at the infrastructure side of things, and Alfonso Morales with Consor Engineering, thank you, is looking at the thoroughfare plan transportation aspects. So, here we go, use this one. No. Was it working for you?
No.
And the arrow doesn't work either.
There we go. Power on. Still not working. All right, we must be locked up. There we go. We're on next slide. Where I wanted to start is anytime we're doing comprehensive plan work and we're thinking about future land use map, just to make that distinction between the purposes of the future land use map relative to the zoning map. This is in the materials that were in the packet, and this will be in the land use section of the comprehensive plan. But in general, that the future land use map is a more broad brush, general look at what the future looks like. Zoning map is your legal instrument. It's the rules that have to be followed. Future land use map is kind of setting the groundwork for what ends up as regulation. And it is a way to look at how your community is changing over time. So as we look at future land use, and we're thinking about things like homes, commercial, industrial, all range of uses. Wanted to take you through a few slides about kind of how we look at the world. And a lot of people in the urban planning world now try to look beyond just those uses, but think about places and what a community is going to look like in the future. We like to look at land use along this spectrum from the most natural, untouched lands to the most urban places. And as we'll talk about, Manville certainly does not have the urban end of the spectrum, but you are very much in that middle portion. Some parts of the community very much still of a rural atmosphere, semi-rural, and then we're having that newer wave of development that is more auto-oriented. You're getting more retail development with parking lots, so we'll talk about that as well. So what we focus on when we talk about character is this mix of three things. Open space on individual properties, or if you think about broader areas of your community, and then where buildings end up being built, and then those paved surfaces, driveways, parking lots, to serve development. And it's often to deal with the automobile, to park automobiles, driveways. So how those three pieces interact within communities. So we go again from the most rural areas, and on those circles, you see that rural is mostly about open space, not as much building and paving. Suburban, we start to move into more of a developed city situation, but still a predominance of green and open space. Then we get into areas, and that's a typical kind of mall or retail strip corridor. You see a lot more, especially paving, just dealing with parking and regional shopping areas and all the buildings that go with that. Manville, of course, doesn't have a traditional downtown, but then in a downtown area, it's very much about buildings, and parking ends up more on the street in parking lots, but much more pedestrian-oriented and a more compact footprint. It's also about how spaces are enclosed, and so, of course, this is nowhere near Manville, but we work in plenty of places where it's a very dense environment and not so much about a spread-out situation. Even in smaller cities, this is downtown Nacogdoches, and so that just a couple of stories of buildings kind of frame main streets and make it more of a people place, as opposed to more of where Manville historically has been on that spectrum, more wide open, not as much about development and enclosed spaces. In some places, it's actually the trees, and we had the discussion tonight about landscaping and tree preservation. It's vegetation and trees that can enclose streets and spaces, and in rural roads kind of framed by trees. Then we get into the part of the spectrum where it's more about development, buildings, and pavement. Some of you may know where this street is. This is right off the tollway. If you can picture the large landfill that's along the tollway going more toward the Sugar Land direction, Missouri City. So that's what that looked like a while back. I actually hadn't looked at it in a while. This is the Google Street View. This is what it looks like today. So landscaping absolutely can make a difference over time. But this is where we spend a lot of our time in a lot of cities we work with is how do you absorb more dense development, growth, more people living closer together, but not lose some of that flavor, the character of your community, the greenness. So even in more dense development, landscaping absolutely can make a difference over time. On the commercial side, certainly shopping centers, and the concern here in the image on the right, for example, is on typical retail development, the buildings are toward the back of the property, and what's across the fence? Homes. And so in the image on the left, neighborhood off to the sides and in the rear of the shopping center, that's where all the trash pickup happens, the delivery, drive-through lanes sometimes end up in the rear of retail properties. So it's all of these things that we have to think about, as it's not just different types of land use, but the different character, how they're developed. Is it mostly about buildings and paving? Is there some green in the way it's designed? So as we look at some views of Manville now, I always look at the city on the rise on the wall, and city in transition, that's where you are today. And so no question that we heard from plenty of people in our public meetings, in the survey that was conducted last year, that, they're feeling that change. And so we have areas of the city that are older, more green, more open, larger lot, single family, more development that's done densely, but it is fortunately master plan development. It's being done to a high standard, and there are open areas often for drainage detention, so you have your open water features, and then more dense subdivisions as in on the bottom right in the highway mixed use zone. So it's when things start to change and communities grow and what ends up next to each other. And so another example, we were just talking about the car dealerships out on 288 and the issue of buffering. That's been a challenge and in many places. As you start to grow, you start to see where some of those difficult points are. So on the north edge of the Toyota property, for example, that pavement and parking of the car dealership is right to the back fences of homes. Buffering will make a difference there. And that's the Blue Water Lakes area in the image on the left. So again, it's what we have to deal with on the edges between residential and commercial, but those homes that are fronting toward very nice open area, water feature, behind them now will develop commercial activity along Highway 6. So it's those edges and the buffering and how those work together that we need to focus on as we look at land use. There's certain land uses, high school, certainly now Manville Town Center, just the scale and what they're meant to do, a large grocery store that brings people from not just your community, of course, but the surrounding area. A fair amount of parking is needed, so we end up with areas that are more, and I didn't actually talk about the term. We use this term auto-urban because I talked about that spectrum from urban to suburban to rural. Auto-urban is kind of that in-between of suburban and urban where it's a lot of coverage of the landscape. Urban is more about buildings and paving, but it's not the walkable aspect. So you've covered a fair amount of the landscape, but it's mostly about dealing with cars. So the folks along McCoy, that's what happens as community grows. A new high school is built, so they have something more intensive across the street. Larger lot residential to the right. So these are the things we have to think about as we start to plot out what could happen on remaining open areas in the city. And this is another example. Urgent care was mentioned recently. If you can picture the urgent care right near Meridiana Parkway on Highway 6. So the image on the left is what it looked like before development. So there's the current development. And even looking at it today, the trees and the landscaping are growing up around that site. So again, it makes a difference. But I use these examples just to show that when people in our surveys and in our meetings talked about, I like having new shopping, new things, but the community's changing and it looks different. And so over time, as more areas develop and you have more sites that look like this, it adds up. More of your community has more paving. And of course, in this part of the world, it has drainage implications, runoff, heat, concrete surfaces certainly add to temperatures, and then just the aesthetic aspects. So in a lot of places we work, it's what we don't want to be. So in this part of the world, you might hear we don't want to be Broadway and Pearland. Mm-hmm. In other places, we don't want to be Mason Road out toward Katy. So you hear those examples. So that's another of our challenges. As Highway 6 is now developing, commercial follows rooftops. How can we get ahead of that? So as we've done our work and looking at the current zoning ordinance, when comprehensive plans are updated, that's often a time to relook at your development regulations. Adjustments are being made along the way as needed as issues come up. But we've made some observations just as we've looked at the ordinance. All of this is with deference to the city attorney. We certainly want to make sure that he's comfortable in anything we recommend, but these are things that we might end up as action items in the comprehensive plan. The current zoning ordinance has very typical purpose statement tied to state statute. So we recommend when you have a refreshed comprehensive plan, we now have a strategic plan for Manville with those series of guiding principles with themes like safety and being a connected community, to get some of those key words into the front of your zoning ordinance, that those are the things you're trying to accomplish as a community. The zoning ordinance is one way to accomplish some of those. Also, when you get to your individual zoning districts, that each of those has a purpose statement. What are you trying to accomplish in a different part of the community with that type of zoning? So there's some general explanation up front, and those words tie to the comprehensive plan. So your planning and your zoning are connected. We know this can be a sensitive discussion, but as we look at today's zoning, and this is in a lot of places, and we work, I don't know of any place we work that wants apartments. Most places don't want density. They don't want rental apartments. It's a reality. But there's a spectrum of other possibilities, and this may not be today's Manville. It may be 10, 20 years from now. But as we look at the zoning ordinance, there's certainly single-family homes, and then there's multifamily. And there's these other options in between ownership in all cases, and even in duplexes, and these different types of homes can be done in a very good way. So we bring that up because there's a term called life cycle housing, that can you stay in your community over your lifetime? Can you start out as a young person and have a place affordable to live, work your way up, maybe have a family at some point, larger home, and then you start to downsize. So as Manville grows and matures, this might be a consideration to have places for other types of housing. Where those places are is, of course, the sensitive part. Where those end up, how do we deal with that? One thing that struck us, and certainly, Manville, as a small city, adopted zoning for the first time at some point. Very common to see that there's sometimes catch-all zoning districts, but today's heavy commercial district really strikes us as heavy industrial in places. That's where everything from paper manufacturing to chemical manufacturing, things like that are in the ordinance. Certainly not permitted in some cases, but in a few permitted by right. In that same zoning district are retail stores, daycare for children, restaurants, drinking places. So all those things are kind of mixed together. The question for us with the comprehensive plan is a couple of things. Do we have an area of the city that's designated for industrial? We do have some uses down along Highway 6 that are industrial in nature. But going forward, do you see any place else in Manville that would have certainly that level of industry? If not, that's a consideration that the comprehensive plan points toward, maybe at most things like warehouse, light industry, smaller scale. That's what a lot of communities aim for. But then that could have implications on the zoning side. So whether to separate those out in zoning, that's some things that are on our mind as we look at the current zoning. Planned unit development, we talked about developments like Valencia, Pomona, on and on, all the very nice developments you have. When we work on zoning ordinances, one thing we try to do is incorporate some of the benefits and outcomes of master plan developments into your ordinance more by right, that they're things that you want to allow people to do and encourage them to do, not have to go through a special review and approval process. And I highlighted some things in the purpose statement. This part of the ordinance is where there is a purpose statement for planned unit development, very typical words, but it always strikes me, and I'll go to the very bottom, that the planned unit developments are meant to promote development that will benefit both the citizens that live, work, and play in the city and visitors. And then there's a lot of other good words about protecting resources, open space, just a lot of benefits to the city. Our question is, why don't we try to do that everywhere? Why is it only in these places that come in for a special application and a special approval? This is certainly meant to accommodate your master plan communities. So that would be part of our recommendation, is try to bring in more of the beneficial outcomes of master plan development across your city. The step of more landscaping, more buffering, that's what master plan communities do so well. So that's a good step. Finally, this is kind of just a question from us. We work with places that have distanced apartments, for example. Baytown is an example where they have a distancing requirement between apartments as they were getting a proliferation of apartment complexes. They have to be separated by a certain distance. So there's other places. We just worked with Edinburgh down in the valley. They just, within the last several months, adopted a spacing requirement for car washes. They were getting overrun with car washes. So it caught my eye that Manville, even at this stage of development, has done spacing for gas stations, dollar stores, convenience stores. Our question was, how's it going? Is it working well? Is it something you wanted to see as a commission, perhaps?
We got 2 auto parts stores coming up.
Yeah, and donut shops and dentist's office. I mean, the gas station's working pretty well, except for the one that we gave for Tractor Supply, but no. I mean, we got donut places right next to each other down the street. So how do we fix that?
Urgent care.
Well, we fixed one of those. We fixed that best we could. The problem is that, if things are just zoned like commercial, then there's not a lot of, we don't have a say in, and I get it. It's just part of the world, right? We live in a supply and demand system. I mean, that's just what it is. And as much as we say we want to control that, it's just not how that works. And so you can't, if it's zoned what it's zoned, there's not much we can do, and that's okay. I mean, sometimes, things work itself out naturally, but, you also got to go with whoever's wanting to rent the space or buy the property too, so,
That's it. You guys nailed it. Zoning is historically was about residential over here, commercial over here, deal with the edges, buffering. But it's a free market. We do, we regulate what happens and we regulate uses, but we don't tend to pick and choose. The distancing approach is a way to avoid some proliferation, but somebody must think there's a great market for donuts here or for medical needs.
What are they telling? Maybe that's why they're putting doctor's offices in, because we got so many donut shops.
So I often make comparisons to our work with Fulsher because Fulsher grew similar to the trajectory that you're on, and you can only do so much with zoning. If there's things that you don't want, you need to go out and get the things you do want. And you made the comment tonight, for example, with Valencia, if they've got a commercial reserve, what are some things that could happen there? So it's almost more of a recruiting approach and having some influence in what does end up in your city, not just whatever shows up.
Away, yeah.
So, but again, the spacing requirement is one way. So there is the Highway 6 overlay that kind of raises the bar on within 700 feet on each side of what happens along there. We'll make some observations on maybe some other ways to think about dealing with quality. And again, you can't deal with uses just with zoning, but the mix of uses is partly an economic development exercise as well. So at the last meeting, Jennifer showed an image that was just, again, very broad brush, kind of our thoughts of how we look at Manville and where it may be going in the future. We heard from a lot of people that have probably been here a long time that talked about why they moved here and that they wanted more openness, they wanted separation from neighbors. And so as happened in Pearland, as happened in Fulsher, we've worked with Dayton up on the northeast part of Houston. The Grand Parkway is going there now, so their world is changing. Magnolia, Northwest, small cities that are at the edge of metropolitan growth. And so to this point, you're seeing it mostly around the 288 corridor. I've been thinking a lot about what happens as we get away from there, and it's partly an infrastructure question. Where are there even services to accommodate any type of more dense development? But this was kind of an image we put out there of kind of the east side of the city and the extraterritorial jurisdiction, maybe maintaining more of that semi-rural atmosphere. The thing is, there's a fairly established pattern of 1 acre properties, homes in that part of the city. We have our master plan developments more in the west and northwest. and then Meridiana certainly on the south side. So our next step is to think about, for a future land use map, some potential designations of different areas of the community. We sometimes start with a lot of designations, sometimes start simple. We are putting out some simple, broader thoughts here tonight to match up with that map. The next step is to get to a much more detailed map, not to the point of a zoning map, but again, a more broad brush look at the future development potential, growth outlook for the city. So the first one is rural conservation, and again, the descriptions of these are in your materials that were in the packet. But rural conservation, just that name and then some of the things we talk about in the description is ways through zoning, certainly with larger lot zoning, and just the uses that are allowed, trying to maintain more of that atmosphere over time. I will tell you that even though people have been here a long time and like where they've been, when somebody takes that offer to sell their property, and then a number of people do in an area to sell to new development, and then other people see how the area is changing and they decide to sell, that's how an area turns over. So even in areas that have some existing homes and maybe large lot pattern, that can change over time, re-subdivision, reworking an area. So rural conservation, and it's tough in Texas. We can do zoning, we can be careful with where we extend utilities, things like that. But again, we're at the edge of the metro area where there's need for housing, there's growth. So what's the future of Manville? So then we think about a designation, suburban mix, and again, being simple here, we didn't split out suburban, commercial, residential, but as I showed on those images, areas where there's still open space, it's still a balance between some green and built areas. So we try to do that on the future land use side to then address that on the zoning side. The arrow is pointing to, again, some of our master plan communities, as I say, areas that purposely plan their larger developments to have open space to deal with drainage, but also for aesthetic reasons. The next one is general residential commercial. These are your typically auto-oriented areas. So I'm pointing toward Manville Town Center as an example. And then, there's areas maybe in the central area of Manville that might develop at a more dense pattern over time. We don't know. I mentioned re-subdividing maybe some of those 1 acre lots. We'll see how that plays out. But I'll show you on the next slide. I'm kind of interested in the north central part of the city in ETJ. And finally, that question of whether to split up heavy commercial versus light industrial. There are areas that are designated today for these types of uses, but whether to make it more distinct in the comprehensive plan and then on the zoning side. So now, talking about different types of uses, in the rural conservation, certainly a fair amount of that area may remain that more ag atmosphere, just in some places just because of floodplain and the bayous, creeks, areas that aren't going to develop as much. But we certainly have our larger properties with maybe one home, and then we have our areas that are in that 1 acre pattern. And I'm sure you folks are aware, but certainly that's driven often by county requirements. If you have water and septic, that you got to have at least 1 acre to spread those out. So that pattern is fairly well established in parts of the area. If there's any commercial out in those areas, typically it's at your intersections, usually because there's not centralized utilities out there. The suburban mix, the next category, and that's where I've got the arrow pointing toward kind of that north central area. If the master plan developments, are building out, and then we've got the city center project, the city making an investment kind of in that central area, what's the future of that area? Could that potentially be where you start to see property turnover and more dense development over time? Again, not the density of in-city, neighbor right across the fence, more of a suburban. And I didn't put that observation in these slides, but one thing that we've certainly talked about that caught our eye is in the zoning today, there's the 1 acre, the open single-family residential. Then there's the single-family residential down in the 6,000 range of lot size. Really need something in between. And of course, cities are getting a lot of pressure nowadays for narrower, smaller lots, but that is one way to maintain more of a suburban atmosphere, larger lot, more emphasis on green, is to have another option in between. Could be 10,000 square feet, somewhere around there. But in the suburban areas, again, there could be some overlap here, still some of that 1 acre pattern, but it certainly brings in your 1 acre or your master planned developments. That point about greener single-family residential is what I just mentioned about maybe another zoning district in between. That's a medium lot size between 1 acre and the 6,000. Neighborhood-oriented commercial, kind of at corners of neighborhood areas and subdivisions, frontage areas, as we talked about, along, could be places like Masters, Highway 6, and as some of these other thoroughfares develop over time. Something that Manville doesn't have now, but could in the future, it emerged over time in Pearland, is areas that are more campus style, medical, business park. So again, that contributes to keeping more of a green atmosphere if it's not all buildings, all paving. General commercial and residential will probably end up separating these, but again, this is more what your single-family residential zoning provides for today, relatively smaller lot. There's that question of, is there a place for attached single-family residential, things like townhome, duplex? And then, your typical auto-oriented commercial shopping centers, Manville Town Center now, but the smaller centers that you're seeing along Highway 6, with the concern about the mix of uses and the appearance, the quality, which the overlay along Highway 6 deals with. And then that question of heavy industrial, light industrial, whether we show it anywhere else on the map or just some of the places where it's existing today. But when you start to see some of your bigger box, your Lowe's, Home Depot top stores, where there's outdoor storage, typically outdoor activity, that's kind of more in the heavy commercial realm versus some of your lighter commercial. So I know that was a lot. I meant to stop earlier, and hopefully some of that discussion resonated in talking about that spectrum from rural and how Manville started out to where we are today. It talks about in the material that there's nothing today or for the foreseeable future in Manville that would be considered urban. We don't have that type of development here. Manville, Pearland Town Center tried to design in some of that with a more walkable kind of core area, but it's still giant parking lots all around to deal with the amount of traffic that comes there. But again, did some of that resonate as far as talking about difference between rural character versus suburban and then more car-oriented character? Very good, very good. So, want to switch over to thoroughfare plan discussion, and once we put a map like that up, it's usually no holds barred. But first, these are some of the words that will end up in the comprehensive plan, things that we heard, certainly confirms things that we observed about the community as we got to know Manville better. But, everything from certainly traffic flow, safety. Thoroughfare plan deals with that third point or the second point about connectivity and being able to get from here to there and have multiple ways to get places, which is very important for your emergency response, but also things like school buses, trash collection, being able to get around the community a number of ways in hurricane situations, disaster situation, that you have different ways to get around. But just the basics of maintaining your street system over time and protecting the investment that went into that, technology and what that can do for your traffic signalization and helping with traffic flow. And again, you make these comparisons against where you are today relative to a Pearland next door, just getting to, technology in their traffic signal systems, within the last several decades after extensive growth. So this is a 10, 20-year outlook, these comprehensive plans. So it's bringing up some items that might not happen next week, next month, but planting seeds once again. Emphasis on pedestrian safety, biking safety as you grow and as there's more traffic, more people wanting to get out. Certainly on Highway 6 especially, but looking at where there's turning activity, safety, and how you control safety along those roadways. Public transportation certainly came up, as it does in all discussions. It's challenging in smaller cities with less population, less density to this point. And then we heard very specific spot locations, certainly when school is in the morning and afternoon, peak times, and certainly your partnerships with all the key agencies that have the dollars, that have some of your dollars, trying to get some of those dollars back, and just coordinating projects between city, county, TxDOT, of course. So next slide is the current working version of potential new thoroughfare plan. And I'll hit some of the highlights, but as I mentioned, Alfonso with Consor is here that's focusing on this part of the project. We really looked at the map, the existing map first, and some things that stood out were, and by the way, solid lines on the map are existing, built. In some cases may not be fully built to the ultimate, widening or width of a roadway. The dashed lines are future projected and desired connections, potentially. But first thing that struck us were some very good connections all the way across, either east-west or north-south. That's what we're looking for, to move traffic that people can get to different destinations in the community. We also look at kind of the density of the street pattern. Again, are there alternatives in an area if one street were underwater in the worst case, or other ways to get places? And then you get to a point where, especially where there's a fair amount of development already on the ground, are there places where we can still make connections before the opportunity is probably gone forever? And so the colors that are on the map, the purples are the highest level, and that's a parkway designation on the current thoroughfare plan map. Next level down, and that's roads like Magnolia at the very top of the ETJ. Masters is in that designation. Next level down is arterials, the red lines. So that's still meant to carry a fair amount of traffic, of a wider street. And then next level down are the collector streets. Those are in orange. And then we've got some other colors that we added just recently. There's a couple of aqua colors on the map, and we've called those need further study because in discussions between us and staff, in some cases it's, again, some tricky locations where can we really hope to make that connection someday. It could be floodplain. It could be because there's existing homes and development in an area. In some cases, we're trying not to cut across a number of properties. You try and follow property lines where you can. So in a few places, we did add some possibilities to add or remove segments from the map. Those are in blue based on discussions between us and staff. So there's a lot there to consider. And yes, sir.
On that comment of cutting through property lines.
Yes.
I really was looking at like Cemetery Road.
Yes.
It looks like it goes back right next to the cemetery.
Kind of wraps around it.
You do know you cannot put that road thoroughfare right next to the cemetery.
And
we've already had this fight.
And one,
she was mayor.
That finger's going to go off.
Well, I'm kind of upset because, I mean, we actually went through this, that road cannot be right next to the cemetery. And I still have that document.
It is there.
Yeah.
Well, now.
You can't move it right next to it. It's private, so.
That's true.
So
it would have to be shifted out. I can get you the document again because I still have it. So, and I did that under Ed. If you remember, me and Gaspar went toe to toe. So.
And one thing that we've talked about that we'll be adding to the map, because we understand that the history is that this map or the current map has been taken very literally at times, These thoroughfare plan maps, like the future land use map, are meant to be broader brush,
Yeah.
trying to show connections from A to B. There's typically a note on the thoroughfare plan map that these alignments, when designed and built, can shift
Yeah.
within 1,000 feet, something like
That's what I was
that.
really hitting to, because I think it was already shifted, but that's why I was wondering why it's back on this one.
It moved back.
So, yeah. So, there's something to look at.
And of course, in a lot of cases, you're trying to follow established streets or paths that
Correct.
people are used to, so you're not
Yeah.
disrupting properties, but hear your point. As I said, we put a lot in front of you tonight. Wanted to kind of open up at this point for things that struck you as questions, comments, but certainly can talk about the map in more detail as well. Our next step on both future land use is to then now lay out a more detailed map based on these ideas and categories, and now a more specific thoroughfare plan map in terms of some recommended changes versus some things we've been kicking around. So, all yours, Mr. Chairman.
So, I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
But I can get you that if you need it, Bobby. And you don't remember it, do you?
I don't remember much about that at all.
Okay.
So if it's something that, involves a comment back on the proposed
Well, the original was done when Gaspar was here, and they tried to move it right next to the cemetery. And there's actually a federal law protecting cemeteries from any thoroughfare plans so you're basically not going to be Galveston. So you're not going to have your main road right next to a cemetery. And so.
I did want to ask you about your last statement, though, about the thoroughfare plan being a broad brush thing, because we were pretty much set that plan to give every property owner the expectation of what exaction is going to happen when they go to plat. So we don't have a broad brush opinion of that where it goes 1,000 foot either way, because when a property owner buys property and they know that they may have the exaction responsibility when they go to plat, that's some certainty to that property owner, whether they do or they don't. Otherwise, how would the city be moving Kirby or moving, a certain thing or one way when they go to plat, that we pretty much do rely on that for some sort of certainty for us and for the property owner.
Right. The key word is may shift. And it's really for the benefit of the larger developments and the master plan developments that come in with a different concept from what's on the adopted thoroughfare plan map. And in existing developed areas, yeah, we're very definitely typically following existing streets, and then where you're trying to show with dashed line potential connections, trying to follow property lines and things like that. It tends to be in your less developed, broader brush areas where, like that aqua line in the center of the map, where it's a curving line that likely doesn't follow property lines, that there's some leeway there on the designer side to come to the city with something that's not strictly that curve and that line on the map.
I think in those cases, we've got amendments to our thoroughfare plan that we take to council for that purpose. We've done those. They're very few. I think in the past 10 years, we've maybe had, 2 Joes, maybe? There are very few amendments to the thoroughfare plan that council's made, but with that particular thing in mind, if there's a developer coming that wants to do something different through the development, that we do that. But anyway, I just didn't want to leave the impression, though, that it's something that any property owner that has that exaction when they go to plat, they could just come and say, well, move it over my neighbor's property 1,000 feet down the road, and that we don't usually do that. So.
Right, at the point of design and platting, typically the map is updated to reflect how a Pomona was built or how a master plan development was built or a larger subdivision. No, it's more the point that there is some flexibility in the system on the proposer side that, the public interest is to make a connection in the larger roadway system. If you're good with that line, that's what we're trying to accomplish.
I think what you're saying is they can be amended, and that's our position, is that it is pretty hard and fast, though, but it can be amended.
Right.
That's the way we would phrase that, I think what you phrased. But.
Okay. As I said, we want a comfort level of the city attorney.
I really do appreciate that, and, but staff also is going to be having a huge amount of input on how we want to address some of these.
So the question at the end of the night is always, comfort level with what you heard? Are we on the right track? Does this make sense for Manville? Certainly devil's in the details, but to this point of where we are, like what you're hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you, and we will be back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, on to item H, Development Services Staff Update. Who is?
Yeah, so it's the second meeting of the month, so you have a list of updates from staff. Just like every time, we have a few development meetings, pre-development meetings that we've had. It ranges from a wedding venue to a bank branch, a multifamily proposal, commercial building, retail with restaurant, and it's in the list. I don't want to talk in detail about each and every project that we've met about, but I definitely want to highlight the disclaimer that I always say. These pre-development meetings are just initial discussions, and it may not result in a project in several situations. Then in terms of certificate of occupancy approvals, we've issued certificate of occupancy for a church, First Liberty Bank here on Highway 6, and the UPS store on Highway 6 as well. We did not have any commercial ground-up construction approvals this past month. And in terms of other updates, I would like to mention that the development map link that was sent to y'all, that's working. It's updated on the website. You can access it from our homepage. You can access it from the department's page. You can access it from the GIS page. There are multiple ways to get into it. Another update that I would want to mention is the proposed amendment to the Manville Town Center PUD, which was discussed in January, where y'all had tabled that item pending more details on the ownership-related complication. The applicant has withdrawn the application for right now because they need more time to kind of resolve that situation, and they'll bring a new application when they have more clarity on that issue. And that is it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to item I. Consideration and possible action to direct staff to provide applicants written statements of the conditions for any conditional approvals and the reasons for approval of any plans or plats that were not approved per Texas Local Government Code 212.0091. Do we have anything? Nothing.
We just have that one, well, it's technically a deferral, but it's always on the agenda just to make sure. But this meeting, the only one, we don't have any, the only one that we have is, was approved as part of the consent.
Yeah, so no action then on this. So then the last one.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? So motion passed. That was easy.
Thank you.
This was okay. I have to go find my mouse.
Okay.
Have a good night, okay?